All right, so you guys wrote a DBQ on Buddhism in class. So I figured it might be helpful for some of us that are still struggling with this to go through the process of writing a DBQ and look at how somebody would approach this question. Now, I did make this DBQ, and I looked at the documents and thought, well, they can be sorted a couple different ways, but I haven't written this DBQ before. In fact, I haven't written a DBQ in a while. So I'm going to be going through and I'm going to be looking at the prompt the same way you are, and I'm going to be looking at these documents and going through that process using my document-based question and answer mapping sheet and using all my documents to start mapping out an essay. So the first step says to deconstruct the question. What is it really asking? So the question, I've got this prompt, right? And it says, based on the following documents, analyze the influence Buddhism had on Indian civilization from 550 to 185 BCE. So you might know or not know that that lines up around with the Mauryan Empire, right? I can look at my historical context and I can see that it says that Buddhism in India reached its zenith under the rule of Ashoka from 272 to 232 BCE. So I know that he ruled during that period, and I know that it was toward the end of the time period I'm looking at. So then I've got to deconstruct the question, right? I have to look at what is it really asking me. So it looks like I'm being asked to say, what was Buddhism's influence on India during that time period? Or how did Buddhism influence India during that period? Right? So I've looked at my chart, I've rephrased the question. So my thesis, I can't really write my thesis until I look at my documents, because my documents are my proof for my whole essay, right? My documents are not an afterthought. It's really what I'm basing everything on. So before I even look at my thesis, I need to look at my documents. So I open it up, and I've got a stupa. Right? It says, document 1, this Buddhist temple known as the Great Stupa was constructed between the 3rd century BCE and 1st century CE in northern central India. It was originally commissioned by the Emperor Ashoka. So based on this document, I know that Buddhists built temples. I know that Buddhism spread across northern India. I know that Ashoka, who was Mauryan, and even if you don't remember that, it says it in the background, right, the historical context, it says that he was an emperor of the Mauryan Empire. That Ashoka commissioned it. So he wanted it built. And based on this, I could assume that that the government endorsed Buddhism, at least for a little while. I know that they're willing to devote money to it because you have to pay laborers and you have to support, provide support to construct this kind of thing, probably collect taxes. So it's something that's a priority of the government and they're putting money behind it. It's still there, so they're building it to last in a way, but that's not really helping me at all with this document. So I know some things about the document. I've drawn a couple conclusions. All right, my document 2. I know that my document 2 comes from a book called Ashoka and the Decline of the Mauryas by this historian, Ramila Thapar. I don't know anything about her, but I know that she wrote this book about Ashoka and the Mauryans. So it says, when the war in Kalinga was over and the people were conquered, he, Ashoka, felt inside him a great crisis, a stirring for meaning and a remorse. Ashoka goes on a pilgrimage seeking a guru, a teacher. And by the riverbank he met a Buddhist monk, and the monk told him to sit beneath the Bodhi tree where the Buddha had found enlightenment. And there the power of ideas and the power of the state came together in a uniquely Indian way. It was a rejection of the path of violence and of a whole way of understanding history. While he was here, Ashoka gave rich gifts to the poor. He consulted with local communities about proper governance, about good conduct. Forming in his mind now was a political order of the sort which had never been conceived before in the history of the world. So this document tells about Ashoka's conversion. He consults a monk, all that stuff. He goes to this symbolic place because it's where Buddha found enlightenment, right? He's rejecting violence, right? I know that it was after a war, the war in Kalinga. I know that that was a particularly bloody battle and that hundreds of thousands of people died, but you might not know that, and that's okay. You know that there was a war, right? And so he has this change of heart after a war. If you remember it because of the stuff that we did in the previous class on the Maurya and the Gupta using the textbook, great. If you don't remember it, that's fine. So the war in Kalinga prompts this reflection and whatever, and so he decides to convert. So he gave gifts to the poor, consulted with local communities about proper governance, right? So he's still a king, he's still an emperor, so he's concerned with governance, about good conduct. Forming in his mind now was a political order of this sort which had never been conceived before in the history of the world. So what this means is that Buddhism is impacting governance, right? He's changing the way he runs his empire based on these teachings. So, document 3. Whoever holds wrong views and commits misdeeds is not noble, whatever his birth. Whoever restrains himself in deed, word, and thought, and develops the Bodhisattva Dhammas until he attains complete eradication of defilements in this very life is the chief, the noblest among men, and the devas, irrespective of birth. So this is from a sutta, right? Buddha's teaching. So we know that this is from Buddhist scripture. This is an excerpt from a scripture from part of the Tripitaka. So he's talking about a rejection of the idea that just because you are born in a noble class doesn't mean that you're a good person, right? You can, if you hold wrong views and you do bad things, you're a bad person. It doesn't matter if you're born as a Brahmin or whatever, like you're still a terrible person. So he's kind of rejecting, so we know this is Buddha talking, right? He's our voice. I know that he's rejecting caste in a way here. That we're focused on the individual, that high caste does not equal spiritual purity. So this might impact society, right? Maybe we're focused less on the caste. Buddhism might be more accepting. Okay, so this one kind of seems about government. This one's kind of about government. This one's about society. All right, document 4. It says, as the Buddha outlined in the Four Noble Truths, the thirst for existence leads from rebirth to rebirth. Lust and pleasure follow. Power alone can satisfy lust. The thirst for power, the thirst for pleasure, the thirst for existence, there, O monks, is the origin of suffering. So that power alone can satisfy lust. So maybe this is, it could be comments on government. I don't really know. I mean, it could be, he's talking about the things that are part of like the suffering, right? That is the Four Noble Truths. So he's teaching about Four Noble Truths. This kind of, I might be able to go a couple different directions with this document. This is the document maybe I'm least confident in so far, that like I'm not really sure where to put it. Document 5. So it says it's excerpted from the Sutta Pitaka. So it's one of the baskets of the Tripitaka. So that means that this is Buddha's writings. So I know this is Buddha talking. All right. So it says the 12 duties of a universal emperor. Rule by righteousness, and then that your provision of ward and protection too. So they're responsible for providing for those in the emperor's immediate circle, the armed forces, governors and administrative officers, royal dependents, civil servants, Brahmins, householders, craftsmen, traders, town and country dwellers, religious devotees, beasts and birds, prevention of wrongdoing in the kingdom, distribution of wealth to the poor, and seeking advice from sages aspiring to greater virtue. So this is like advice to rulers on how to govern like a Buddhist. Right, because like power is, I just learned in document 4, it was about power. So in document 5, now I'm looking at like if you're in power, what are the expectations of your behavior if you're still going to be a good Buddhist? So you're in a position of power, power is corrupting, it leads to desire, it leads to suffering, blah, 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 blah. So can I still be a good Buddhist if I am in a position of power? Well, maybe, if I'm following these expectations for behavior. So this is kind of advice. It kind of might influence, it could be where Ashoka gets some of his ideas of how to govern. So it's kind of about government. All right. Document 6 says excerpts from the edicts of Ashoka, circa 250 BCE. Ashoka's 33 edicts are located throughout modern-day India, Nepal, and Pakistan. Those engraved on pillars are known as pillar edicts, and those on walls or boulders are rock edicts. So I've got some pillar edicts and some rock edicts. Rock edict number 2 says medicinal herbs, whether useful to man or beast, have been brought and planted where they did not grow. Similarly, roots and fruits have been brought and planted wherever they did not grow. Along the roads, wells have been dug and trees planted for the use of men and beasts. So it kind of sounds like Ashoka is planting stuff to take care of his people along roads. Maybe travelers? Maybe merchants? We know they're traveling, we don't know why. All right, Pillar Edict 4. I have decreed that prisoners who have been convicted and sentenced to death shall be granted a respite of 3 days when their relatives may appeal to the officials for the prisoners' lives. So Ashoka is he is reforming laws to be more just. Rock Edict number 6. I consider that I must promote the welfare of the whole world, and hard work and the dispatch of business are the means of doing so. Indeed, there is no better work than promoting the welfare of the whole world, and whatever may be my great deeds, I have done them in order to discharge my debt to all beings. So he's saying, like, I'm doing all this awesome stuff But the reason I'm doing this to discharge my debt to all beings, so that he's acknowledging that maybe he wasn't the greatest person before, and now he's trying to actively work to be better, right? So he's serving others, he's serving his population. So Ashoka he's like modeling, devotion. And this is his faith is his motivation for doing what he's doing. All right, and Rock Edict number 12. The faiths of others all deserve to be honored for one reason or another. By honoring them, one exalts one's own faith and at the same time performs a service to the faith of others. So Ashoka is tolerant. So now I'm looking at this map and I see that these things, I've got major rock edicts, I've got pillar edicts, and I've got minor rock edicts. And I see that the Mauryan Empire under Ashoka is gigantic, right? It goes past the Indus Valley to the west, pretty far west. It goes all the way past the mouth of the Ganges in the east. It stretches down into the Deccan Plateau in the south and up into the Himalayas in the north. So it's huge. It's most of India. So I see these rock edicts all over the place. So that tells me that Buddhism has spread, probably because of Ashoka, maybe. And I know that he's encouraging its scope. He's got this huge empire and he's using that to help spread these beliefs. And he's keeping this large empire unified in sort of an unusual way, right? Because generally we think about rulers having like an iron fist, and he's definitely saying like, I'm doing all this great stuff for you because I'm a nice person and because I want to atone for being a terrible person before. So he's being very tolerant and still maintaining this large empire. It's not going to work out for him in the long run, but whatever. He'll be dead before that happens, before it falls apart. So it's not really his problem. All right, and then document 7. Thus, with mind concentrated, purified, cleansed, spotless, with the defilements gone, supple, dexterous, firm, and impassible, I directed my mind to the knowledge of the destruction of the avasas, which are desires. I duly realized this is pain. I duly realized this is the cause of pain. I'm stopping and I'm thinking, hey, this sounds an awful lot like Four Noble Truths. And I duly realize this is the way that leads to the destruction of pain. I duly realize these are the avasas. This is the cause of the avasas. This is the destruction of the avasas. As thus I knew and thus perceived, my mind was emancipated from the avasa of sensual desire, from the avasa of desire from existence, and from the avasa of ignorance. So it sounds like the Four Noble Truths. I see that this is an excerpt from Siddhartha Gautama explaining his teachings as retold in the life of Buddha as legend and history. So he's preaching. And I see, it kind of seems like he's describing enlightenment. Okay, so I've looked at all 7 of my documents. So now I have to come up with a thesis. And I'm not going to really be able to come up with a thesis until I group my documents, because my thesis is going to have those groupings in it. So starting with document 1, it was kind of about government. So let's say tentatively government. So that would be document 1. War in Kalinga was over, blah, 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 Buddhism in Kazakhstan. So I might say document 2. Document 3 is different from the other one. So it might be about society. Document 4, he's kind of talking about maybe government. I don't really know. He could just be talking about religion in general. Like maybe that's my other category. 12 Duties of Universal Emperor, so I'm going to put that over here. Document 6, he's providing for his people. So I might put that here as well, but I also might put it over here. And then document 7 is about the teachings. So I'm going to put that over here. I only have one for society, which maybe that's not like a great category, or maybe there's something else that I could put in that category. Like maybe I could put document 1 in there. Or maybe society and religion are too closely related. So what I need to be able to do is come up with 3 categories, 2 or 3 categories that are nice and tidy. So I might want to say, for my thesis, Buddhism influenced India through, or Buddhism's influence on India can be seen, because that sounds smarter, in India's government, Indian society, and the change in Indian religion as a result of the teachings of Buddha and the rule of Ashoka. Okay, so now when I sit down and write my essay, the first thing I'm going to talk about is government. I'm going to talk about how, in my first I'm going to have an introductory paragraph where I'm going to outline some background information. So I'm going to say things like, Buddhism is one of 2 major religions that developed in India, that it is widely practiced in Asia, but that it hit its height, and I know this because it's in my background, right, in my historical context. I know that, and I could say that Buddhism was at its height in India under the reign of Emperor Ashoka. As a result of Ashoka's conversion, Buddhism became more widespread, at least during the period, and I could refer to my time period that's in my question, between 550 and 185 BCE. So from the beginning of Buddhism till shortly after Ashoka's reign. And then the last sentence, just to make it easy on me, the last sentence of my introductory paragraph is going to be, Buddhism's influence on India can be seen in India's government, Indian society, and in the change in Indian religion as a result of the teachings of Buddha and the rule of Ashoka. So then in my first paragraph, I'm going to say, because I said government first, I'm going to talk about government. So in my first body paragraph, I'll say, the influence of Buddhism from 550 to 185 BCE in India can be seen in the governance of India. And then I'll say things like, documents 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6 support this position. And I would say that it's, according to document 1, which is this Buddhist temple, we can see that the government was very involved in the religion, right? Because this was commissioned by Ashoka. So I know that government funds were used. I know that there's a lot of like state money being used to spread this religion and to worship this faith. So that's a connection that I can make. And I have to make sure I'm doing analysis. That I'm not just saying like the Great Stupa was constructed by or commissioned by Ashoka. That I'm saying, and as a result, or this document demonstrates that the religion of Buddhism was very much tied to or influenced Indian government because the emperor's devotion was such that he was commissioning structures to be built throughout India, spreading this faith and allowing people to worship, right? I could go a different way with this essay. I could group these differently. I could say that based on the following documents, you know, so that instead of using this thesis and those groups, I could look at it completely different. I've got the same question, but instead I could maybe look at these documents and I could say that Buddhism ends up impacting India or influencing India in terms of people's practice. So, and I could use document 1 because it's a temple. I could say in terms of, I could say document 3 also because it's rejecting the caste. I could say document 7. Another category might be so it influences India in terms of people's religious practice, and those are ways. It's hard to not use government because a lot of the documents relate to Ashoka, so I'm going to need to use government probably as a category, but I don't have to group them the same way. I could say document 5 definitely because they're rules for leaders. I could say, I could even put document 2 over here because while Ashoka is an emperor, he's still a person, right? So he's having this change in his religious practice. I'd probably put it over here as well. I'm going to maybe put 4 and 6 over here. And I could be done, right? I could just have 2 categories and that's okay. So that Buddhism influenced India in terms of people's religious practices and in terms of the way India was governed between 550 and 185 BCE. This was facilitated by the preachings of the Buddha and the writings of Ashoka. Ultimately, I'm using all my documents, right? So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So I've got all my documents used. I'm using 2 twice, and that's okay, right? I can use one document multiple places. But if I'm using one document in like all my categories, it's either like the most amazing document that anyone has ever seen, or maybe I don't really understand that document. But ultimately, once I've got it tightened up here, and once I know why these fit because I've done this analysis, then the essay kind of writes itself, right? Then I'm just taking this raw material that I've put together and creating my essay. So this part, the writing part, doesn't take that long once you've done this legwork, right? Once you've laid this stuff out. So for those of us that are struggling with DBQs, I hope this kind of thing is helpful. We're gonna keep doing them in class, so I hope that you get comfortable and it doesn't just become this thing that's torturous for you every single time we do them. That we're gonna have one with China, it's probably gonna be on the Great Wall. We're writing this one on Buddhism. But my goal is that you get more comfortable with these, not less comfortable, that it doesn't just become an insufferable thing. Because, you know, I was talking to Mr. Holtzman, one of the AP teachers, and he'd asked, you know, how you guys were doing with it. And I said, you know, I think that as long as they're related to the content, I think that it's helpful. And he made a fair point that in life, no one's going to come up to you and stop you on the street and be like, here, quick, sort these documents. I need all this evidence arranged. But it does teach you to see patterns and it teaches you to organize things. And we're all doing things, we're working on DBQs that are all related to the content. So I'm not giving you DBQs on things that are completely out of left field just to have you go through the exercise of organizing and sorting, because he's right. You're never going to be in life expected to just blindly go through something you have no background on and then defend it to the death, right? You're going to be given an opportunity to research. You're going to be given an opportunity to look at stuff that's related to something you understand. But this is all stuff that's sort of an extension of what we've been talking about in class, right? So we're doing it on Ashoka and Buddhism because we're talking about Ashoka and Buddhism. It's just another way of taking a closer look at some of that, extending our study of some of the things that we're talking about in class anyway. Throughout high school, you're going to be doing different styles of DBQs, but I hope that by the end of this year, you're comfortable with writing DBQs. So I hope this was helpful for those of you. I hope it wasn't too long to sit through, and good luck with your other DBQs.